Good morning. I'm Gail Christian. This is your Women's Circle Live. It's a great morning here in Palm Springs, California. I'm just saying that to make you feel bad if you're like my sister-in-law in Chicago. This morning, we've got two wonderful guests. We've got the author, Jewelle Gomez, always interesting, always a favorite of mine. And we're joined today by our entertainment editor, Shan Carr, the comedian, the film festival producer. Looking good, Shan. Nice seeing you, honey.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. This program is brought to you by your Women's Circle, which is an organization of business and professional lesbians. And the whole idea is to give people an opportunity to get together and network. The same as this program, where the whole idea is to get together and spread some lesbian culture and thought. Before we talk to Jewelle, I just wanted to say one thing about a little annoyance of mine. At a certain age, you have to be very careful because life starts translating itself into little annoyances. But as most of you know, the Democrats are attempting to push through a federal minimum wage of $15 an hour, which they continue to call a livable wage. Now, that's a little ridiculous. And where is $15 an hour a livable wage? You would have to live in the United States and commute to Bazirkistan in order to make $15 an hour work for you. And it gets a little troubling when you've got a handful of people living in this country whose combined wealth is more than that of more than half the nations in the world. And then you're going to try to tell me that $15 an hour is a livable wage, and not tell me, but tell people who make $15 an hour that ought to be able to work for them. Well, that's a little absurd, and that's just one of the little annoyances that you go through in life when you reach a particular age of like over 12. But I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to introduce our first guest this morning, who is Jewelle Gomez. Jewelle is an author, a poet, a playwright, a cultural worker, an influencer. Jewelle, you're about everything, girl. I just don't know. A mechanic, a cook. I don't know. Go on and on. Jewelle, thank you so much. We are delighted to have you, and we obviously want to talk about. You've got a large body of work. But you're one of these people, and I don't know if you think that this is good or bad, that I think forever is going to be identified with a particular body of work, and that's the Gilda stories. And for those of you who don't know what those are, who haven't had the chance to read this novel yet, it's Jewelle interprets Black life through the eyes of a Black female runaway slave who meets Gilda the vampire. Is that good or bad? Did I hit it on the head or not? Is that?
That's perfect. And I think you hit at the core of one of the reasons I wrote the story. I wanted to be able to interpret the experience of African Americans in this country over a long period of time, since people seem to think that Black people just arrived here in the 60s. And having a vampire who could live for a couple hundred years seemed the perfect way to do it.
I understand there's a sequel. There's a new Gilda coming.
Yes, I am working on it's a sequel, but the way I'm structuring it is each of the chapters in the new book take place between the chapters in the current novel. I'm calling it Gilda Threshold. And it's really more about Gilda's adventures from her interior, like what she's feeling, what she's learning, and the difficulty there is in living life for so long and losing people along the way.
What do you want people to get from the Gilda stories? What do they need to come away with?
Well, as I was writing Gilda, of course, it really evolved along the period as I was writing it. But one of the things that I realized as I neared the end of the editing with Nancy Variano at Firebrand Books was I'm a lesbian feminist, and my character is a lesbian feminist. So that meaning, I wanted people to go on the adventure with Gilda, and at the end of it, feel like they had a better understanding of empathy, of a sense of community, the importance of community, the value of responsibility. The more power you have, the more responsibility you have to those in your community and in your family. It's kind of everything that capitalism teaches you. It has kind of the opposite effect, which is, with capitalism, the more money you have, the less responsible you are. You could be the richest person in the world and only pay, $75 in taxes, not mentioning any names. So it's really meant to get people to key into the values I think are important for our culture to thrive.
I understand that the lesbian director, Cheryl Dunye, is interested in Gilda possibly as a television series. Is that so?
It is. I'm so excited. Yeah, Cheryl Dunye is a legend. She directed Watermelon Woman, which of course
right.
the first Black lesbian feature film in cinematic history. And she's done some wonderful, wonderful work on television. She directed several episodes of Lovecraft Country, and Queen Sugar, two really dynamic, historic television productions. So she optioned the rights to Gilda, and we've been in discussion about, the shape of it, the look of it, and all of that. So, television takes a long time, just like film, and hopefully she'll be able to raise the money to do the pilot, and then somebody will snap it up.
Let me ask you, and sitting around deciding that you're going to write a novel about the, lesbian African-American experience, to come up with that you were going to do it through the eyes of a vampire, who were your literary influences that made you make that decision?
Well, it was a very difficult moment, not to write it, because I was in love with the idea of Gilda immediately. But, it was not, vampire fiction was not the first thing feminists or people of color were going to be embracing in the 1990s or late 80s. Although I had very great experiences, as we were talking about earlier, with Alexis DeVoe's Flamboyant Ladies Salon. I would read from Gilda and people were wild. But the larger community, I think, was a little bit hesitant to embrace a vampire character as a serious vehicle. But Joanna Russ, who was a lesbian speculative fiction writer, she wrote The Female Man. She wrote a number of classic lesbian feminist texts. And I admired her so much. And the best thing that ever happened for Gilda was, out of the blue, back in the day, I got a postcard from Joanna Russ, who lived in Seattle. And at that time I lived in New York, and I got this postcard saying, don't stop with Gilda, keep her going. And I almost, of course, fainted. And that was really the reason I knew that she was important. Audre Lorde was another person who was kind of a mentor for me. And I asked her to read the stories, because I wrote each chapter individually. And I asked Audre if she would read them and give me some suggestions. And she said in her beautifully mellifluous voice, I don't really care for short stories that much. And I'm definitely not that interested in vampires. But I will read it. And she read it and she came back to me and said, this is a novel. You have to spend the time developing this into a novel. And I was often running from there.
Also, I understand that they've also danced Gilda, that it takes many lives.
Yes.
You here and then you dance here.
Urban Bushwoman Dance Company in New York City commissioned me to turn Gilda into a theatrical piece, which we spent 3 years working on. Toshi Reagan was one of our collaborators, and she did all of the music. Urban Bushwoman created a spectacular, magical evening performance of Gilda with dance and singing that toured the United States. I mean, it had sold out performances around the country. And Toshi Reagan wrote some of the most incredible music for this piece. It was called Bones and Ash, A Gilda Story. Since we couldn't do the whole novel, it was too long. But you asked me about influences, and Toshi is currently now working on an opera based on Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. And Octavia Butler was also another one of my influences because she was the first Black woman I ever read who was writing speculative fiction. So she confirmed that it could be done.
You know, actually, that was one of the first connections when I was trying to make a connection with vampires. I said, well, no one's writing about vampires. And as close as I could come, I said, well, Octavia Butler, the sci-fi queen. It's interesting to see that I also thought that perhaps she had been an influencer.
Yeah.
Is Gilda your best friend?
Gilda is my best friend, I have to say. I wouldn't say that if my cat were in the room. But, I've lived with her in my head, in my heart for so long. Whenever I feel I'm having any difficulty with writing whatsoever, and sometimes you go through periods where you sit down and you can't quite grasp what it is you should be working on, or if you're working on something, what should come next. If I have any problems like that, all I have to do is think, kind of like, what would Gilda do? But I would imagine Gilda in a particular situation, and all I have to do is plop Gilda down in a situation, and my mind just takes off and starts writing her. She's so deeply embedded in my mind and my heart. And so, I've written pieces that will probably never see the light of day, just because I was using Gilda as an exercise.
Now, Gilda has been in the previous book sort of, I think, described as a benevolent vampire. Is she going to get a little meaner in this upcoming book? Is she going to really just jump out of the bushes and bite you on and throw you to the ground?
I think what we're going to see is a very, yes, she has been benevolent, and I think she has a benevolent heart, and the family of vampires she was born into is benevolent. But I felt like I wanted people to get to understand Gilda more of her interior life. What is it that she struggles with? I mean, it is, if I'm saying, she has power over life and death and she can live forever, there must be some downsides to that. And what are the emotional things that she has to wrestle with in order to have a balanced life? Just basic things like, if you live forever and your best friends are going to die around you, you can't turn everybody into a vampire. What does that mean to her? And I actually wrote a story in which she gets to talk to a woman who's a witch, who's over 100 years old, but she's mortal. And Gilda's fascination with the idea of aging skin and having these memories that were going to evaporate when you die, form the core of this particular chapter. So it's been really emotional to deal with Gilda in this context.
When are we going to see the new book?
Oh gosh, well, I've got maybe 5 chapters written so far. I'm imagining it to be 10. I will start to look for a publisher for it probably in about a year. I'm finishing a play right now, and I can't really go back into Gilda until I finish this play, but that's my next project.
Well, let's talk about some next projects. Well, let's back up. I understand you did a play about one of my favorite singers, Alberta Hunter. You want to tell me a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. Alberta Hunter always fascinated me. She was a singer obviously in the 30s, and she wrote Bessie Smith's first big hit. She wrote so many of her own songs. She was a star on Broadway and in Europe. And then she did USO shows, and then she retired, became a nurse, got a degree, even though she didn't have a high school diploma. She got her nursing degree. She became a nurse for 20 years and then was retired from nursing because they thought she was only 60. She was in her 70s. And then she made a comeback. It was phenomenal, and she played in New York City at a place called The Cookery.
That's right.
So I went to see her many times. And once my grandmother, who still lived in Boston, she came to New York to visit me. And I took her to see her because my grandmother had also been a singer around that time, on the circuit. And so we get to The Cookery. It was packed, as it always was. And I say to my grandmother, "Now, see all these young women in here? Isn't this great? You know why they're here?" And my grandmother said, "No, why?" I said, "Well, they heard a rumor that Alberta Hunter was a lesbian." And my grandmother said, "Oh, hell, everybody knows that." And it just cracked me up. And I said, "Really?" And from that moment on, I was fascinated by this petite, elderly. I mean, she was very elderly, but she was and she was very sparky and had this kind of seductive, feminine manner. And I thought, there's a story here somewhere. There's a story. And of course, many years later, I decided to do the research and talk to people who knew her personally and figure out some things about her. And I had a grand time with the productions, one in New York and one in San Francisco of the play, because she's such a real sparky character. Yeah. It was quite wonderful. It was quite wonderful to work on it. And then, in fact, 2 of the cast members in New York won Adelco Awards for the woman who played Alberta and one of the dancers who played these fictional characters I created. Won Adelco Awards, which are awards for Black theater artists in New York theater. So I was very proud.
Jewelle, it has been wonderful talking to you. I would let this go on for another hour, but the engineer is waving her hand for me to stop. It's been great. The best to you, the best to Gilda. I look forward to it. And I'm certainly hoping that everything works out and we're going to see the whole thing on TV.
Well, I'll let you know. I'll keep you apprised of how it's going. And it's so beautiful to see you again, Gail. Thank you for having me with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This has been brought to you by your Women's Circle, a business organization for professional women, for lesbians who want to hook up with each other, who want to network and exchange ideas and thoughts. You can find more, and you can join the organization. Sign up for the information. join the organization. It's the dues from the Women's Circle that pays for this show. And I certainly don't want the show to have to go from a half an hour to a 2-minute special. So check out the Women's Circle, become a member. We'd love to have you. We're now going to move to our entertainment editor. Shan, are you there?
I'm here. Hello, hello.
Well, I kept just telling you, you're looking good today, girl. This is Shan Carr. Shan's from Palm Springs, and she sort of runs things in this town. She's a comedian. Shan says that she's performed in every dive bar, cruise, convention, after hours party, wherever they need you, you're willing to go, Shan. Shan, you also have a show that you host here in Palm Springs. Is that a podcast?
It is a Zoomcast, so you can catch it on podcasts on Apple and Spotify, but you can watch it live on Facebook Live as we are doing this, where every Friday morning we stream live at 11 o'clock.
And I'm sorry, I'm reaching over here for my note to make sure that I'm giving it the right name.
I love Palm Springs.
That's right. That's right. And we also have a film festival in town that you are instrumental in making happen every year. And so good. You want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I have been the fortunate token lesbian on the programming and selection committee for Cinema Diverse for 11 years, which is as long as Cinema Diverse has been around, and lots of fun, lots of fun.
And then you're also just won an award for the best realtor. Is that true?
Yeah, I guess they were looking for smart ass realtors because, you know, I'm the kind of realtor who will walk you in the house and go, girl, no, you don't want to buy this. So
you might want to get in touch with Shan if you're thinking about relocating to Palm Springs. Our weather's perfect all year round, never gets above 80. Is that correct?
That's a lie.
Well, that's a lie. That's a lie. Shan is one of our editors. After each show, we now have editors that come in and talk about everything from finance to the stock market to where to buy this and that. And Shan is our entertainment editor, and she's going to talk to you about where you can find other programs of interest about lesbians. Take it away.
Yeah, so today I'm going to give you the tea with sugar and shade because I love some stuff and I don't love everything. But it is a challenge to find lesbian content streaming. And so I'm going to encourage you to dig around on the internet. I'm going to encourage you to embrace the fact that the largest majority of what's being made specifically for lesbians is still pretty indie, and it's still kind of a young perspective. And it's a great way to get an eye on what the young people are doing to change our world without having to sit down. You can fast forward, you know, so go onto the internet. They are our pioneers of social media. They are our future. So a couple of the first things I'd like to mention is Gail Christian was featured in a film this November, and the Your Women's Circle, Melanie Jones, was the co-producer of a product called Lesbo Expo Presents. You can find it on YouTube. It's called Exist, Persist, and Resist and Thrive. And it is a 40-minute docu-comedy kind of about how lesbian artists have pivoted and how we're surviving out there in the world. It's really interesting. Gail was great in it. Melanie was great in it. So you can look that up on YouTube. And I gotta say, YouTube is your friend. You gotta be brave. I mean, you gotta be brave. You gotta dig around, put in, you know, lesbian comedy. I'm gonna focus a little more on comedy because that's my thing, and God, do we need it. So just a couple of quick things. I'll put a link in the thread when this is over. I found a little thing about Kate McKinnon, who is a lesbian out on Saturday Night Live, and she does so many characters, and most of them I just saw her do Anthony Fauci on Saturday night. She does a lot of guys, and she's amazing at it. So I have a 10 of Kate McKinnon's best characters, and you can figure out if you love her or not. Also, there's a great Wanda Sykes thing. Just put in Black lesbians doing comedy and you'll get Wanda Sykes. She has a famous, it's harder to be gay than it is to be Black. And it is so hysterical. And also Gloria Bigelow is a lesbian comedian. And she has a very funny bit about 10 Black lesbians going camping. I'll put the link for that in the thread as well at the end. Also, there is an exclusively lesbian streaming service like Netflix or any of those. It's called Tello Films, TELLOFILMS, Tello Films. And it is all lesbian content. Again, a lot of it is indie. So, you know, you got to dig through. I say watch 3 episodes of anything, give it 3 episodes. And if it has not entertained you, step away. But you will find something. There is an old series that they have there on the show called Lip Service, maybe 5 years old. It is basically the L word. It's the lives, the lusts, and the loves of lesbians in Scotland. So the accent is sexy and the content is good. It's well filmed. It's fun. And then just from the youth perspective on Tello Films, there's a little indie web thing called Happy Wife, Happy Life. And it's 2 comedians and their partners. And they just answer questions and they dish. There's 4 seasons of it. And every episode is under 8 minutes. So again, if you're not in love with it, click forward. One studio film also you can watch on Tello Films. It's called Wild Nights with Emily. It's been out for a couple of years. It's about Emily Dickinson and her love affair. And it's funny and quirky and really interesting. And then I say go foreign because a lot of international lesbian films get more of a budget, get more funding than we do here in the United States. So there's a sweet film called For Izzy, which is about 2 daughters of immigrants from Hong Kong. Really interesting. And then there's also Reverie, REVRY.com. And it is a queer streaming service. And inside of it, there is a lesbian channel called OML, which was started by some Black lesbians in Oakland, maybe 10 or 11 years ago. And there's years of content that they have created or garnered or gleaned from other curated, as it were, OML on Reverie. And even Tello and Reverie, they're both like $6.99 a month. And I gotta say, sign up for these things. There's a free trial period, or even if you actually want to support the queer streaming service, pay the $6.99 and cancel it the next day, right? And then just watch for a month. If you don't love it, don't sign back up. But I encourage it. There is a great short documentary on OML on Reverie called We Can't Breathe. And it is about this young Black lesbian journalist in Los Angeles who hit the streets in LA as all of the BLM stuff was blowing up on the streets. It is, I mean, I feel like we saw all of that, you know, protest stuff on TV, but it is shot with a woman's eye, which you can see is different. And it's shot with a filmmaker's eye instead of a journalist, you know, a newsmaker. It's beautiful. I can't remember. It's 10 or 12 minutes long. We Can't Breathe on OML on Reverie. Super good. And then Stars, which I don't even have Stars. But again, I signed up for the 1-month free trial. I canceled it the next day. And there's some great lesbian content. There is 2 seasons of a series called Vida, which is fun and bright. It's 2 Mexican daughters who come home to Los Angeles when their mom died. And they find out that not only is their mom a lesbian, she's married to the hottest little butch in town. And they have a gay bar. They are the hub of their community in there. So again, Vida on Stars, I really recommend. Quickly, like a classic, Wolf Video has been around 30 years, I would guess. And, right? What?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kathy Wolf was a pioneer of getting lesbian content, and she would mail you the video for $12.99. I think she will still sell you a CD of all of her films for $19.99. But now they have a little streaming on demand segment. You got to look for it and click it, and you can watch stuff for $1.99 or $5.99 or whatever. Wolf Video has some great stuff. Look for the on demand. Also, I didn't figure out where to find it, but there's a great documentary called Stand Up, Stand Out. And it is about 6 gay comedians who started the 1970s and 1980s gay comedy industry in San Francisco. So Tom Amiano, who ran for the school board, the biggest screaming gay guy in the world. And he came from comedy into politics. And so that's called Stand Up, Stand Out. And there is a short version of it that I will put the link up for, but the lesbians aren't as big in the short version. Maybe you can look around for it later. Films, Amazon, you can rent Ammonite, which just came out, right? That's Kate Winslet. She plays the lesbian. Personally, I found it totally depressing. When it gets to art piece for me, I'm shallow, right? 50% of it has no words. They're just sad. And there is one moment where they eventually tear off each other's bonnets and go down on each other. There's a super hot 60 seconds in the middle of this sad, depressing film where the lead actress, as usual, is not a lesbian. I did just watch on Amazon for free, if you have Amazon, Snapshots with Piper Laurie, which is a story of 3 generations of women. And as the story goes on, you find that 2 out of the 3 of the people are lesbians or have a lesbian history. And one of them's a hater who has to be brought along. So I remember hooking you guys up years ago now with the documentary called Political Animals. It's still one of my favorite lesbian docs. And it is about 4 women who went into the California Senate or the California Assembly in the middle of the AIDS crisis when nobody was going to elect a gay man, right? And 4 lesbians over a couple of years all got nominated or elected. And it is beautiful. If you pay an extra $1.99 a month to Amazon, you can get a new segment called Daring Docs. And again, sign up for a month, watch all the docs you want and log off. But Political Animals is worth catching. And then also on Netflix, there's a brand new film that is raising hot callers. It's called I Care a Lot. And it is wonderful and horrible because the 2 lead characters are a lesbian couple. They're both smoking hot and they are awful, awful people. I mean, and you know, I talked to Kate Ullman and she was so offended by 2 things. One, that the lesbian characters are bad. I'm like, boo-hoo. I'm so glad that we can finally just have a villain, right? But the thing is, there was no mention of them being lesbian. They were at no point struggling with their lesbianism. They're just awful people who are well-adjusted in their sexuality. And they get into the assisted living and they screw people over. They take their money. So it's so hard to watch because all of our parents and some of us are looking at that situation, but the movie was good. And I just say, you know, stick with it because, you know, I don't want to say why, but, and then my last suggestion is go international. There's lots of other countries that have streaming stuff that you can watch. There's something called Lesflix in the UK. They actually pay the lesbians money for their content. They show the films. They have Q&As live all the time. Super interesting, Lesflix. And then there's also something called, there's a link, queerfilmfestivals.org. And it's a listing of all the queer film festivals. And because of COVID, you can find film festivals in your own state. It has to be in your state and usually a 30-day window or something. And you can watch all of the lesbian films for a very nominal fee that are in that film festival because they have to be streamed. They are blocked out of state, right? Because you can't have rights to show it everywhere, but really amazing. There's so much out there. I would love to hear what you guys have to say about it. And that's me with the tea with sugar and shade.
Hey, thank you so much, Shan. Regarding the lesbian comics, I just saw recently a new lesbian comic. Her name, I think, is Sam J. I think she's a writer from Saturday Night Live. I think it was Netflix. Obviously, you're the reviewer, not me, but she's really somebody worth checking out. I think that you will love her, and I love your segment, and I hope to see you back soon. And thank you. I think all that information was very valuable, and we've unfortunately run out of time for this week. Thank you, Shan. Good seeing you.
Bye.
Goodbye. Don't forget, this program is brought to you by Your Women's Circle and www.yourwomencircle.com. Check us out. This is Gail Christian. See you next week. Thank you.